Being able to work in a fast paced environment is often a requirement that I see pop up on developer positions, ranging from junior all the way, honestly, to lead. But the problem is that it doesn't make any sense. What is a fast paced environment? Is it just code word for a completely disorganized company trying to hide the fact that they don't have a plan and so they're always changing things very fast and that's a fast paced environment? Or is a fast paced environment just mean that you're going to be working on features one after the other quickly? This is why I have such a problem with the word agile and with the phrase fast paced environment, because I think it's too easy for people to hide disorganization under the umbrella of those terms. When you hear agile, we know what the word agile means, but in the context of software development, agile simply means that you just iterate on your work. And you may hear agile being contrasted with waterfall and things like that. And there's a bunch of different styles of agile. You can get certified in agile. There's a bunch of different stuff. But the one thing I have a problem with it is that honestly, it doesn't really solve the root of the problem. Nor does marketing the fact that you are a fast-paced environment really give the applicant any true information about your company. If I read a listing that says this is a fast paced environment, my first instinct is to then ask, what is a fast paced environment in this context? Because again, it varies, and your experience may vary heavily as you apply and as you work in this industry. A fast paced environment may mean that you're working extra hours. It may mean that you're always context switching. It may mean that you will jump from meeting to meeting. And so you really have to figure that out because I can't I can't stress enough the fact that this is a very a lot of this job is thinking, and sometimes it takes hours to get on the right train of thought in order to solve a problem. But if you're always switching tasks, if you're always switching and jumping from problem to problem, it becomes very hard to truly spend the proper amount of energy in order to actually solve the problem and not just put a band-aid solution on it. And working in a fast-paced environment, as it's said on a lot of places that you'll interview at, is a red flag to me in 2025. And when I hear that, I want to ask two questions. I want to ask, what does the model of work look like at this company? When I log on to my computer, what is my day to day going to look like? What are the regularly scheduled meetings? What are the expectations in terms of sprint delivery and point estimation and stories and everything like that? And I guess a third is, who am I going to be giving updates about this information to? Because that's a big one. If the more people you have to provide updates to, the more times you're going to have to reword your update. And if you have to go from, jump from a technical explanation of it to a business explanation of it to maybe just a wholesale generic explanation of it, that requires thinking and effort. And coupling that to our technical work and then bouncing from meeting to meeting and then having shifting priorities and then having to do production support and then having to do feature requests, estimation, code review, all that stuff amounts to you as a developer not truly getting, the actual engineering time that you need in order to properly and functionally solve the problem. And I fear that how do I put this? I fear that the phrase fast paced environment has gotten picked up by the marketing departments at wherever, and are using that to spin the fact that it's chaos, but don't worry, we know it's chaos, but it's fun and that's what development's all about, right? That's not true, and it's just a sign of bad organization and bad management. And if you have to market the fact that you work in a fast-paced environment as like, I guess, a benefit to the job, I think that that's bad. I'm not sure if it's a benefit, if it's a requirement, if it's a objective fact. I don't know what it is. I don't know what a fast-paced environment means. Does it mean that you do your sprints in 2 weeks as opposed to 3 weeks? Does it mean that you pick up 10 points as opposed to 15? I mean, what's the bar here? What's the gauge for how, fast this environment really is? Maybe to me it's a slow moving environment. We don't know. We won't know. And I fear that the more vague these job descriptions get, and the more fluff that's included in them, it just does everybody a disservice because it doesn't set expectations correctly. When you look for a developer job, you're looking for a couple things, right? You're looking for, okay, what does the deployment schedule look like? What does the support model look like? What does the tech stack look like? What does the team structure look like? What are the regularly scheduled meetings look like? What do the start and end hours look like? And obviously, you ask about benefits and salary, and those are all standard questions that should come up well before the final interview. But if I have to ask about what is a fast-paced environment, that changes the landscape of all my questions because that immediately says to me that whoever was writing this has not really put a lot of thought or time or effort into making this a well-constructed job listing. And I find it very ironic that you can tell that a lot of job listings are not well written, yet they want to get good candidates. So they don't put a lot of effort in, but they expect to get a whole lot of effort out. And I find that very just disappointing because you can tell so many job postings are just copy and pasted when each of them should be tailored to the job, just like the expectation is for us to tailor our resume to the job listing. That's just the basic, requirement for the applicant. But the person posting it should do their due diligence too. They should have the same, uh, you know, sort of review process that we have to go through in order to even get our resume seen. It's a little bit ridiculous, and I honestly, I'm just kind of confused. Like when I was applying to jobs a couple of years ago, I ran into this problem all the time. I would find copy and pasted job requirements that just didn't even match what the listing was for, or technologies would be listed and turns out they don't even use that tech stack, and it just is a whole it's a whole mess. And it takes a lot of applying in order to kind of get through all the bad job postings in order to just figure out which ones are the good ones. And I can't tell you how many times that I saw the description of this is a fast-paced environment. You have to be able to adapt and be agile. It's a bunch of fluff. It really is because it doesn't. It doesn't say. It's a sentence, but it doesn't say anything. It doesn't give me any information about what I'm applying to. It just signals to me that this place probably isn't organized well, or it's going to be chaos, or there's going to be mass amounts of context switching. So that immediately doesn't put me on good terms with how I approach the job, right? And I saw that pop up so many times, and it's unbelievable that that continues to be the language that's used for jobs. It's just wild, and I hope it changes. But honestly, how hard can it be to adjust the language of those kind of job listings? I mean, it can't be that difficult. I mean, if a company is looking for a software engineer, just figure out what the tech stack of the team is and put that into general language and then list the technologies and then list the general just list something about how the team works. I mean, I just don't see how that is so complicated. But yet it's that process has become so abstracted away from like what they're actually looking for, where you read these requirements and you're like, I don't know what I've just read. It's just fluff. So it's kind of silliness. It's kind of disappointing that there's so little effort put into the process but yet they expect to get unbelievable return on the listing. I mean, it's just so silly. Hopefully, the quality of listings improves. I don't see how hard it will be to do that. I mean, you could probably generate a listing with AI, and it would be much more quality. I think a lot of listings are generated now. I mean, you just see the language is just too similar across so many listings, or at least it was a couple of years ago. Uh, that it's like, okay, this looks like it was copy and pasted from a template, which it probably was to begin with, but here we are. And that's what we have to get through. So it's like, I'm not actively looking for jobs currently, but I can tell you that when I was, this is what I saw happen. So if you all see this kind of stuff pop up on job listings, I just just add it to the list of questions that you ask them, and just to clarify, right? Just to make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into in terms of team dynamic, in terms of technology, in terms of working, because you have to interview the company as much as they have to interview you. And it's very important. And it's something that I didn't know until later on in my career. And it's difficult, but just make sure that the job you're applying for is a correct fit. But make sure that you're make sure that you're happy with the arrangement too, right? Like, recognize your own skill set and recognize the value that you bring to the table as well. Don't undersell yourself, and make sure that you understand the fair market value of the work that you're can bring and can do. Because I think as developers, we sometimes our job is seen as an expense, right? Because sometimes a lot of what we do is just tackling like technical debt, which is not inherently, like, it doesn't automatically generate value in the short term. So sometimes our job can be seen more of an expense as opposed to a value generator or a money generator. When in reality, I mean, it's obviously both, right? We have to spend money to make money. That's kind of that's how things work, right? But don't undersell yourself, and make sure that you realize how much value you're bringing, and how much I guess money is being generated by the stuff that you're potentially making. Because that's why software salaries are higher, is because so much money is made by software. And so make sure that you're happy with the arrangement. Make sure that you ask all the questions that you have written down, and try to always be thinking of more. Um, Make sure you don't wait until the last interview to ask the key questions about working. I can tell you one example that I had of this, and that was it was about midway through the interview process. Um, this was years ago, but I found out that there was going to be a bit of travel associated with the job, and it was not primarily, it was a remote job, but there was more travel than I was comfortable with. But I kept asking about it. I'm like, so what does this look like? What is the travel requirements? And it just turned out I wasn't comfortable with it, because it may have been a little bit more than what I wanted to do. So I actually um, I stopped the interview process. I let them know that I wasn't interested in continuing with this process, given that I'm not comfortable with the amount of travel that it could be required. So, but I found that out midway through, so I felt like that was a good time to do that. But if it was at the end of the process, I think I may have felt more pressure to accept the job and kind of compromise, where on something that I may not have wanted to compromise on, just and that just because I was at the end, and I would if I had gotten an offer, I may have felt pressured, like, especially if the offer was good, right? Like, oh, I could take it, and then maybe just hope for the best later on. So just make sure that you do it at the right time and to avoid like undue pressure. Um, if you can, obviously, if you don't, if you need a job, you need a job. So there's nothing you can do. But um, I really make sure you write your questions down and you read them out loud several times. I find that by reading them out loud after you have written them down, it helps you to kind of refine them and think about them, because the questions that you ask, I'm not talking about technical questions either. I'm talking about how you're going to be working day to day. Those questions are so important, and you need to make sure you ask a multitude of people, as many people as you can, because you want to ask those questions to the developers, right? The people who you're going to be working with, because they're the ones that should give you the most straightforward answer to what you're looking for, and that's important. But it might take a couple times of you asking the right people those questions in the interview process to figure that out. So again, everyone has to be happy with the arrangement, right? So you just want to make sure that you're happy where you're at. So that's all I got for today. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.